When we play our game now, we can see that the player is in fact getting hit because we can watch the hearts decrease when he gets hit by an enemy, and we do have a little bit of an invincibility period in there because we want to give the hero time to get away after an impact. But there isn't anything happening on the screen visually that indicates that a hit occurred. So what I want to do in this video is just experiment a little bit with how we might be able to get the enemies to perhaps push the player around when he gets hit so we can see something actually happen. Um, Also, keep in mind, this video is going to be a little bit different than the rest. Right? This is not a how-to video. This is just I'm going to try several things, and we can examine the results. And then when it's time for you to decide how you want your hero to react to collisions with the enemies, you can take bits and pieces of things you learned in this video and do what you want with them. So I'm going to get out of the way and jump into the code. Okay, so all right, so I'm in my hero class, and I'm in the hero class. I'm in the check enemies function, and here is the part where I have detected hits with all the enemies. And so what I want to do now is go ahead and resolve the collisions, right? So I'm in a loop resolve, and so I'm going to loop through all the enemies and just push my player off of them. And so I'm going to kind of borrow something out of the same page as we're resolving with platforms. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check which side of the enemy I'm on. So I'm going to say if self.rect.center x is less than enemy.rect.center x. And this is my way of describing. This is saying that I am to the left of the enemy. I'm doing it a little bit differently than when I did the platforms, because in the platforms I was checking my velocity. But here, my player might be standing still when he gets hit. Also, so the collision could have been a result of me moving. It could have been a result of the enemy moving. So I'm just going to check where our centers are located relative to each other, and hopefully that's enough to figure out what side I'm on. And if that's the case, so I know I'm to the left of the enemy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say self.rect.right is equal to enemy.rect.left. And then we'll check for the collision the other direction. So we'll just say elif self.rect.center x is greater than the enemy. And so now we know that the hero is to the right of the enemy, so we'll set left edge of the enemy equal to right edge, or we'll set the left edge of the hero to the right edge of the enemy. And so we should see a little bump when this happens, and let's find out. So I didn't see much there. We might be able to watch it get a little bit closer. And my player nudged just a tiny bit when it gets hit, and that's it. Okay, so you're not seeing very much. So that's not quite what I wanted. What I really wanted to see was that enemy just push me along. And so let's go think about why. All right, so I have, so here's where I loop through all the hits, but I've got it nested in this conditional that says if the hurt timer is equal to 0, and that's when I check the hits and do the nudging. And we can see that that's exactly what's happening over here, and that is, like the hurt timer is 0 right now probably, and the nudge happened, and then we got to wait a second, and the nudge happened. And it's not till another second passes that we actually get in here and look at the enemies again and determine if we ought to do the nudge. So I think I have to rearrange where my loops and my conditionals are, kind of rearrange the tabbing of this, because I only want to subtract a heart once until I have a second or so pass by, but I want the nudging to take place continually. So let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to take this code right here and put it in the loop. And I'll tab the OOF over, means I can back this up, right? And then let's see. This part right here, which is the nudging, I don't want it in the if the hurt timer is 0 section. I want it to happen all the time for every hit. So I'm going to back that up. And so now you can see that, right, on every iteration of the game loop, what we're going to do is find out what enemies we're going to hit. We're only going to apply damage if the hurt timer is 0. But we're always going to do the pushing. So the other thing we have here is now I realize that I don't really even need this else here. And I'm just going to back this up, level with a for loop. So there is no reason we can't just subtract 1 from the hurt timer every iteration of the game loop. And if it goes below 0, we set it to 0. So that's not something that needs to happen conditionally. Actually, you can attach an else to a for loop in Python, but I think that, I don't know, grammatically that's kind of weird. So let's see what happens now when we run it. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here. And now the pushing is occurring that direction. And let's see if the pushing is occurring that direction. And, we get up against the edge, and we do have some weird behaviors there. Let's see what happens on this side. When I get pushed into a block, it's probably going to be a little bit weird. Okay, and I'm not even sure how to resolve that. That might be something, we're just going to have to experiment with. I'm going to go ahead and let's see what happens when we hit an enemy from the top. I get kind of that weird warp to this, bounce to the side. That's kind of weird. So maybe I also want to figure out, if I'm hitting the enemy from above or below as well, and do the same sort of a nudge. And so I'm just going to copy and paste this. And let's see, we're going to do the center Y in each case. And let's see, if the center Y is less than the rect center Y, then the enemy center Y, so the hero Y is less than the rect center Y of the enemy, that means we're above. So I guess the bottom of the hero should get set to the top of the enemy. And then here, if the center Y is greater than the enemy center Y, then I guess we're below it. So then the top of the hero should get set to the bottom of the enemy. All right, so I'll jump on top of one and see what happens. And I can't pass through it. It's still, weird and kind of glitchy, and I can't jump on them, so that's weird. That's kind of interesting. You can land on top. So one lesson we can take away from this video is that we do have the ability to look at the position of the hero relative to the position of the enemy and maybe do some nudging to try to resolve collisions. And then the other thing we can get out of this lesson is that, when we have a lot of nesting of conditionals and loops and stuff like that, depending on how we organize all this, we can alter the effect we see on the screen. So am I really pleased with the solution right now? Not so much, all right, but at least I've learned something. And so in the next video, what I want to do is explore maybe instead of just doing a nudge, making it a little bit bouncy. Maybe I could make, when the hero hits an enemy, it just kind of bounces off in the opposite direction. All right. So, hope you learned something in this video. And again, this wasn't a how-to. This was more just a way to get some insight. And then maybe, I or we or, one of us can come up with something better later. All right. So I will see you in the next video.